From the very first moment the story begins, the viewer is pulled into a quiet tension that feels like something long hidden is finally rising to the surface. The hook must hold them, so it starts when Keanu Reeves sits alone in a small room backstage at a Hollywood charity event, staring at a letter he wrote but never sent. His hands shake slightly, not because of fear of the stage, but because of what he is finally ready to say about Sandra Bullock, something he has held inside for years. He does not know how the world will react. He does not know how she will react, but he knows he cannot stay silent anymore. It is in this moment that his story begins, and the viewer feels immediately pulled into his quiet struggle, sensing that something big is coming, something emotional and deeply human that will change everything between them. Keanu had always been known for moving through life with a calm spirit, a soft voice, and a gentle respect for the people around him. He rarely shared anything personal, not even when the world begged him to. He carried his pain in a humble way, never asking for attention, never expecting sympathy. But deep down, hidden under years of grace and silence, lived a truth he had never spoken, a truth that had shaped his life more than any movie, more than any award, more than any public moment. It was a truth connected to Sandra, one of the few people who had ever seen through the quiet walls he built around himself. She had been both a memory and a mystery to him, someone who understood him in ways few did, someone who walked into his life for a moment and left behind a warmth he never forgot. The charity event had been planned months ago, but he only learned a week earlier that Sandra would also be there as a surprise guest. When he heard her name mentioned by the organizers, something shifted inside him. He felt an old ache he thought he buried long ago. He felt gratitude, too, and a longing he never fully understood. He spent nights walking through his home, thinking about what he would say if he saw her again. And then something unexpected happened. He wrote the letter. It poured out of him, almost without planning, a long confession of things he had never allowed himself to express. Not a romantic confession, but something deeper, something about regret, kindness, timing, healing, fear, and the strange way life brings people together only to pull them apart again. Now the letter sat folded in his hands, slightly worn from how many times he had opened and closed it. He looked at it one more time before placing it into his jacket pocket, unsure if he would ever give it to her. The event staff knocked on his door, telling him he would be needed soon. He nodded, quietly breathing out. He stood, adjusted his dark jacket, and walked toward the curtain that separated him from the noise of the world outside. He could hear the crowd talking, laughing, waiting. He could also hear her voice somewhere in the distance, soft and familiar, and it sent a wave of memories across his mind. Memories of filming long days, laughing on set, late-night conversations about life, and the quiet understanding they shared without ever needing to force anything. As he stepped backstage, he caught his first glimpse of her in years. Sandra stood near the stage entrance, speaking with a few volunteers. Her smile still carried the same warmth he remembered. She looked calm, grounded, and full of that gentle energy that made people around her feel safe. But there was something else, too, a softness in her eyes that suggested she had lived through storms of her own, storms that changed her in ways the world would never fully understand. Keanu watched her for a moment, unable to move as a wave of feelings surfaced inside him. He wondered if she ever thought about the past the way he did. He wondered if she ever replayed moments from their early years, wondering what could have been different. She turned her head slightly, and for a second he thought she noticed him, but she didn't. She turned back to the volunteers, unaware that he was standing just a few feet behind her. He took a quiet step toward her, then stopped. His heart beat steadily, but louder than usual. He realized how unprepared he was for this moment, and yet he knew running would be worse. He had spent years running from his own thoughts. Tonight, he wanted to face them. Before he could take another step, someone from the event staff approached him, whispering that a reporter was waiting nearby for a short backstage interview. He nodded reluctantly and walked toward the reporter, his eyes drifting back to Sandra one last time. The interview started with the usual questions, his thoughts on the charity, his upcoming projects, his feelings about being part of the event. He answered politely, offering humble responses, but his mind kept returning to Sandra. The reporter noticed his slight distraction and made a gentle joke about his eyes wandering, unaware of who he was looking at. Keanu smiled politely, brushing the comment aside. When the interview ended, he walked back toward the side of the stage, searching for her again. But she was no longer there. The volunteers had moved, and she had disappeared into the crowd. He felt a small sting in his chest, something he tried to shake off. He hoped he would see her again before the night ended. He hoped fate would give him one more chance. A few minutes later, he heard the host announcing her name. Sandra walked on stage with her usual grace, speaking about the importance of helping families in need. She shared a personal story that made the entire audience go quiet, a story about resilience, loss, and hope. Keanu listened from the shadows, feeling a deep respect for the way she opened her heart without fear. She always had that strength, even in the moments when she felt uncertain inside. He watched her speak, remembering conversations they once had about kindness and how they both felt responsible for using their fame to lift others up. It felt like nothing had changed between them, and yet everything had changed. After she finished her speech, she stepped off stage and walked into a quieter hallway behind the curtains. This time, she was alone. Keanu felt a pull inside him, urging him to speak to her. He hesitated only for a second before following her into the hallway. When he called her name softly, she froze for a moment, then turned slowly, her eyes widening slightly when she saw him. There was a brief silence between them, a silence filled with years of unspoken understanding. Then she smiled, warm and gentle, and stepped forward. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice filled with surprise and something more, something he couldn't name. He took a deep breath, meeting her eyes. He felt like he was standing on a cliff, unsure whether to jump or step back. But he chose honesty. He told her he had thought about her often. He told her that seeing her again brought back memories he never let go of. He told her there were things he wished he had said years ago, things he never had the courage to admit. She listened quietly, her expression softening as she realized how much weight he had been carrying. She placed a hand gently on his arm, telling him she had her own regrets too. She said there were moments she wished she had handled differently, moments she wished she understood more clearly at the time. They spoke for several minutes, their conversation slow, thoughtful, and honest. It was not dramatic or loud. It was simple and human, like two old friends removing layers of silence. There was vulnerability in their voices, something that neither of them usually showed in public. As they talked, the hallway around them felt more private, more intimate, even though people moved quietly in the distance. Sandra leaned back slightly, studying his face with a quiet intensity. She asked him gently what truth he had been carrying all these years, the one he never shared. Keanu hesitated. He reached into his jacket pocket and touched the folded letter. He knew this moment mattered. He knew giving her the letter could change the way she saw him forever. He knew it might bring them closer or pull them apart. Before he could answer her question, they heard footsteps rushing toward them. A stage manager appeared, breathless, saying that the organizers needed them both immediately for a surprise presentation. The moment shattered like glass, and Keanu stepped back instinctively. Sandra glanced at him, sensing his uncertainty. She touched his arm again, gently, and whispered that they could finish this conversation later. He nodded slowly, but inside he felt shaken. The moment he had been waiting for slipped through his fingers again, and he wondered if life was playing the same pattern once more. They walked together toward the stage area. People around them smiled, unaware of the emotional storm moving beneath their calm expressions. They stood at the edge of the curtains, waiting for their cue to step out together. The host announced their names, and the crowd erupted into applause. Sandra gave Keanu a small smile, the kind that carried reassurance. He smiled back, but the weight of unsaid words pressed hard against his chest. As they walked onto the brightly lit stage, cameras flashed, capturing the exact moment they appeared side by side. Keanu felt the energy of the crowd, the warmth of the lights, and the pressure of the moment. But his thoughts were only on the letter inside his pocket and the truth he was afraid to reveal. The presentation lasted only a few minutes, but each second felt stretched by the tension between them. When the applause ended, they stepped off stage, and Sandra turned to face him, as if she was about to ask him again about the truth he never shared. But before she could speak, someone hurried toward them with urgent news that stunned them both and shifted the entire night in an unexpected direction the moment the stage lights faded behind them. Keanu and Sandra felt the shift in the air before the words were even spoken. The volunteer rushing toward them looked pale, anxious, and out of breath, and for a second, it felt like the world around them paused. They had been standing side by side, still carrying the emotional tension from their unfinished conversation, but now something much heavier entered the atmosphere. The volunteer glanced back and forth between them, unsure whose name to say first. Finally, with a shaky voice, she whispered that the director of the charity event needed them immediately because something urgent had happened outside. Neither Keanu nor Sandra knew what that meant, but they could feel it wasn't something small. Keanu stepped forward calmly, his heart beating a little faster as the hallway seemed to narrow around them. The volunteer asked them to follow her quickly. They walked through the back corridors, passing staff members who were whispering among themselves, their faces worried, their steps hurried. Sandra looked at Keanu, silently asking if he had any idea what was happening. He shook his head gently, his expression unreadable but alert. They had been ready to continue their personal conversation. Instead, they were now being rushed toward something unexpected, something that would pull them deeper into emotions neither had prepared for tonight. When they reached the small office where the event director waited, they immediately sensed the seriousness of the situation. The director stood by a table, holding a phone to his ear. His hands trembled slightly as he listened to the voice on the other end. When he noticed Keanu and Sandra entering the room, he ended the call and lowered the phone slowly, his face tense. He told them that a young fan, a teenager who had come with her mother to see the event, had collapsed outside the building due to a severe panic attack. Apparently, she had been overwhelmed by the crowd and the flashing cameras. She was stable now, but shaken and crying. And the only thing she kept repeating, according to security, was that she wanted to see Keanu and Sandra. The room fell quiet for a moment. Sandra's eyes softened immediately with concern, and Keanu felt a familiar ache in his chest, the one he always felt whenever someone was suffering. Their hearts were both shaped by compassion, shaped by an understanding of what it meant to struggle silently. Without hesitation, Sandra asked where the girl was. The director explained that the girl and her mother were waiting in a private lounge nearby, hoping for even a minute of reassurance. Keanu nodded, already moving toward the door. Sandra followed close behind him, her steps quick and determined. The lounge was small and dimly lit, offering a quiet space away from the noise of the event. When they entered, they saw the teenage girl sitting on a couch, her mother beside her, holding her hand tightly. The girl's eyes were red and puffy from crying, and she looked overwhelmed, as if the night had become too heavy for her young heart. But when she saw Keanu and Sandra walk into the room, something in her expression shifted. Her breathing slowed, and her eyes widened with disbelief and relief all at once. She tried to stand, but her mother gently asked her to stay seated. Keanu walked over slowly, kneeling down in front of the girl with a quiet gentleness that always came naturally to him. He spoke softly, telling her she was safe, that everything was okay, and that she was not alone. Sandra sat beside her on the couch, placing a comforting arm around the girl's shoulders. The teenager began to explain that she had been struggling with anxiety for years, and being in such a large crowd made her panic. But seeing Keanu and Sandra, even from a distance, made her emotional because their movies had helped her through difficult times when she felt alone. Her voice trembled as she said this, and tears formed in her eyes again, but this time they weren't only from fear. They were from gratitude. Sandra squeezed her hand and told her that it was brave to speak about her feelings. She said that asking for help was not weakness but strength. Keanu nodded, sharing that he understood what it felt like to carry heavy emotions in silence. His voice was low, steady, and sincere. He told the girl that life could feel overwhelming sometimes, but small moments of connection could bring light back in. His words weren't dramatic or rehearsed. They were simple, honest, and human. And the girl listened closely, feeling seen in a way she had never expected. For several minutes, the room became a quiet sanctuary, a place where kindness filled the air. The girl's breathing steadied, her hands stopped trembling, and she even managed a small smile when Sandra made a gentle joke to ease the tension. The mother thanked them repeatedly, tears in her eyes as she expressed how much this moment meant to her daughter. Keanu and Sandra reassured her that they were happy to help, that compassion mattered more than fame or public appearances. It was one of those moments that revealed the true nature of their hearts, a moment the cameras would never capture, but one that showed who they really were beneath the spotlight. After they left the lounge, Sandra looked at Keanu with a soft expression. She told him that she had always admired how he handled moments like that, with such humility and sincerity. Keanu brushed off the compliment gently, saying that he simply did what felt right. But inside, her words touched him more deeply than he expected. Her kindness always reached him, even when she didn't realize it. As they walked back through the quiet hallway, the emotional weight of helping the girl mixed with the emotional weight of their unfinished conversation. The night was not over yet, and both of them knew it. When they reached a quieter corner of the backstage area, Sandra stopped walking and turned toward him with a seriousness in her eyes. She told him that earlier, when he said he had something he never shared, something tied to years of silence, she felt it in her soul. She said she could feel that it wasn't something small. She gently asked him again what truth he had been carrying. Her voice was calm, patient, and sincere. Keanu felt a deep ache inside him, an ache that came from years of unspoken thoughts. He reached into his jacket pocket and touched the letter again, feeling its edges under his fingers. He knew this moment was coming. He knew he couldn't run from it. But he also knew that once he shared his truth, everything between them would shift. He took a slow breath and told her that after filming their first movie together, he had gone through a difficult period in his life. He didn't share details at first, but he explained that her kindness during that time had meant more to him than she ever realized. He told her that he carried regret, not because of anything she did, but because of what he failed to do. He regretted not telling her how much her presence had helped him heal from silent wounds. He regretted letting fear stop him from speaking. He regretted assuming he had more time to open his heart. His voice grew softer as he spoke, and Sandra listened with complete focus, her eyes softening with each word. She told him she remembered those days, too, that she had sensed he was carrying something heavy even though he always kept a polite smile on his face. She said she wished she had asked more questions or encouraged him to talk, but she didn't want to intrude on his privacy. And then she admitted something that made Keanu pause. She had always wondered if he held back because of her, if something she did or didn't do became part of his silence. Keanu shook his head quickly, stepping closer to her. He told her it was never her fault. The silence was his own doing. He said he had always admired her strength, her warmth, her ability to make people feel seen. He never wanted to burden her with his pain, so he kept it hidden. Sandra felt a sting in her chest at his words because she realized how deeply he had struggled alone. She whispered that he didn't need to protect her from the truth. She said she would have listened, that she always cared, even when life sent them down different paths. The hallway around them felt quieter now, as if the world knew this conversation needed space. Sandra looked down for a moment, her voice soft when she asked him what changed tonight. Why now, after so many years, did he choose to break his silence? Keanu hesitated, feeling his heartbeat steady but heavy. He told her that seeing her again reminded him of things he buried. He told her that time made him realize that regrets only grow when left unspoken. He told her that kindness like hers shouldn't be left unanswered. And then he said something that made her inhale sharply. He told her that losing opportunities to speak the truth was one of the quietest pains a person could live with. Sandra felt her throat tighten. His words hit her in a place she didn't expect. She stepped closer, gently touching his hand in a gesture full of understanding and compassion. She whispered that he could tell her anything, that she wasn't afraid of whatever he was holding. Her eyes carried a warmth that made Keanu feel grounded, as if this was the moment he had been waiting for without realizing it. He pulled the folded letter from his pocket slowly. Sandra looked at it with surprise, sensing its importance. He said he wrote it because he couldn't find the courage to speak aloud what he felt. He said he wasn't sure if he was ready yet to read it, but he wanted her to have it eventually. Sandra reached out but paused her hand before touching it. She looked into his eyes and asked him gently if the letter held something painful. Keanu exhaled, whispering that it held something honest. But before he could place the letter in her hand, a sudden burst of noise erupted from the hallway behind them. Raised voices, hurried footsteps, and the sound of people calling Sandra's name filled the air. Sandra and Keanu both turned around instantly, their moment breaking once again. A staff member rushed toward them, looking panicked. She told Sandra that a reporter outside had leaked a rumor claiming Keanu and Sandra were involved in a private scandal, something completely fabricated but spreading fast through the crowd and online within minutes. The director needed them immediately. The story was already gaining traction and the event organizers were worried. Sandra's eyes widened with shock, and Keanu felt a cold heaviness settle into his stomach. The timing couldn't have been worse. The letter slipped slightly in his hand, and Sandra looked at it with longing and frustration, knowing their moment had been torn apart again. She whispered to him, her voice trembling slightly, that they would finish this conversation no matter what. Keanu nodded, but inside he feared that the world's noise was about to pull them into a storm neither of them wanted. They turned toward the chaos waiting outside the hallway. The private rumor was spreading fast, and everything was about to change again the moment they stepped into the main hallway. Keanu and Sandra felt the tension hit them like a wave. It was not loud at first, but the energy in the air had changed. People whispered to each other in hushed voices, staff members rushed back and forth carrying phones, and security guards stood by the exits as if preparing for something unpredictable. Sandra felt her stomach tighten as she watched the way everyone reacted, their faces filled with worry and confusion. Keanu walked close beside her, scanning the crowd quietly, his calm expression hiding the storm forming inside him. The event director hurried toward them with a serious look on his face. He explained that a blogger outside the building had posted a fake rumor claiming that Keanu and Sandra were having a secret argument backstage. and that the argument was caused by something dramatic from their past. The rumor claimed they were emotionally unstable, causing chaos behind the scenes. None of it was true, but in the age of instant news and quick judgment, the lie had already been shared thousands of times within minutes. The director said the press outside was getting restless, wanting to capture photos or shout questions as soon as the two actors appeared. Sandra felt her chest tighten. She had been through rumors before, but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was because it came at the exact moment when she and Keanu were finally opening up to each other after years of silence. Maybe it was because the rumor twisted something deeply personal into something ugly. And maybe it was because she could feel Keanu's worry beside her, the quiet way he processed pain without letting the world see. Keanu asked calmly what they needed to do. The director said they needed to show unity. He asked them to walk out together for a short statement to calm the crowd and shut down the gossip. Sandra looked at Keanu, unsure how he felt about facing cameras while his emotions were already tangled. He met her eyes and gave a small nod, silently saying he would face whatever came with her by his side. As they approached the exit doors, the noise outside became clearer. Shouting, camera shutters firing rapidly, people calling their names, some repeating the false rumor as if it were a fact. Sandra took a slow breath, her hands trembling slightly. Keanu noticed and instinctively moved closer to her, offering a quiet steadiness without touching her, respecting her space but letting her feel his presence. Before stepping outside, Sandra whispered that she hated how lies spread faster than truth. Keanu whispered back that truth still had its power, even if the world was loud. His voice was calm, and there was a warmth in his tone that eased her tension just enough. She nodded slowly, feeling grateful for his support. The security team opened the doors, and the bright outdoor lights instantly hit them. Cameras flashed from every direction. Reporters pushed forward behind barricades, shouting questions with impatient voices. Sandra felt the pressure immediately, the overwhelming energy of dozens of people trying to get a reaction from her. Keanu walked beside her, steady and quiet, like a shield made of calm. The director stepped forward first, addressing the crowd with a strong voice. He announced that there was no argument, no scandal, no drama. He said the rumor being spread was false and irresponsible. The reporters ignored his words, shouting over each other, demanding answers directly from Keanu and Sandra. One reporter called out harshly, asking if they were hiding something. Another shouted that the world deserved to know the truth about their broken relationship. Sandra felt anger rise inside her, anger at the invasion, the assumptions, the way people felt entitled to twist their lives into entertainment. Keanu stepped forward before she could speak, his expression firm but gentle. In a quiet, steady tone that made the crowd lower its volume, he said there was no broken relationship. He said there was no argument. He said the only thing happening backstage was kindness and conversation. The reporters were not satisfied, but his voice carried a sincerity that made some of them hesitate. Sandra stepped beside him, adding that the rumor was hurtful and completely fabricated. She said they had always supported each other with respect, not conflict. The moment she finished speaking, the cameras flashed even harder, trying to capture every small expression on their faces. Sandra felt the exhaustion building, but she also felt relief that she had spoken her truth. Keanu placed a hand lightly on her back, not a romantic gesture, but a supportive one, grounding her in the chaos. After a few more words from the director, security guided them back inside. The doors shut behind them, blocking out the noise. Sandra let out a long breath as the tension drained from her body. Keanu watched her quietly, noticing the strain in her eyes. He asked softly if she was okay. She nodded, but her voice was shaky when she admitted she hated being misunderstood. Keanu nodded slowly, saying he understood more than people realized. As they walked down the hallway again, they realized the private moment they were supposed to have had been pushed far away by chaos. Sandra felt the weight of the broken conversation pressing against her heart. She turned to Keanu and told him they needed a quieter place, somewhere they could talk without interruption, somewhere the world's noise could not invade. He agreed immediately. The director allowed them to use a private break room upstairs, usually reserved for performers who needed space to breathe. It had soft lighting, a couch, and a large window overlooking the city. When they entered, the room felt distant from the chaos below. Sandra walked toward the window, staring out at the glowing lights of the city. Keanu stood a few steps behind her, unsure if he should approach or give her space. She turned around slowly, her expression softer now but filled with layers of emotion. She told him that they couldn't let the outside noise bury the truth they were finally trying to reach. She asked him once again to share whatever he had been holding inside for so long. Keanu felt the familiar tightness in his chest. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the letter once more. This time, he held it with both hands, feeling the weight of the moment pressing into his palms. He walked toward her slowly, then stopped in front of her. The letter felt heavier than paper. It felt like years of silence, years of restraint, years of wondering, what if? Sandra looked down at the letter, her breath catching slightly as she sensed the depth behind it. Keanu spoke quietly, telling her that he wrote the letter because he didn't want his voice to fail him when it mattered most. He said he wrote it because he was afraid of hurting her, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of saying the wrong thing. He said that silence had been his protection for years, but it also became his prison. Sandra's eyes softened even more. She whispered that she wasn't afraid of his truth. She wasn't afraid of his past. She wasn't afraid of whatever pain he thought might break her. She said she had lived long enough to know that honesty, even when difficult, was better than silence. Keanu inhaled, steadying himself. He told her she could read the letter if she wanted, but he also said he was willing to speak the words aloud if she preferred. Sandra reached out, touching the letter gently with her fingertips. She said she wanted him to choose, not because she was afraid to read it, but because she wanted him to be the one to decide how to share his heart. Keanu hesitated. His voice was almost a whisper when he said the words that cracked open the emotional tension between them. He told her that when they finished filming their first movie together, he was going through a silent grief. He didn't explain the details yet, but he said she was one of the few people whose kindness reached him during that time. He said her presence became a light he didn't expect. He said he regretted not telling her how much it meant to him. Sandra stepped closer, her eyes soft and full of compassion. She whispered that she always felt something unspoken between them, something warm and gentle, something they never had the courage to explore. Keanu nodded, saying he felt it too. He said he carried regret not because he wanted something romantic from her back then, but because he wished he had told her she played a part in his healing. She placed her hand on his arm, and for a long moment, they simply stood there, two people finally acknowledging years of quiet emotion. Keanu felt his throat tighten, the weight of years lifting just slightly. Sandra felt her own emotions rising, realizing how deeply their paths had shaped each other without them ever speaking it aloud. But then, just as the moment settled, something unexpected happened. There was a sudden knock on the door, a firm, hurried knock that interrupted the fragile calm between them. Keanu and Sandra both froze, their hearts sinking slightly as the quiet room filled with tension again. Sandra whispered that she wasn't ready for another interruption. Keanu whispered the same. The knock came again, sharper this time. Keanu walked slowly toward the door and opened it. The person standing outside delivered news that neither of them expected, news that carried shock, urgency, and a sense of danger they did not see coming the moment Keanu opened the door. The quiet space of the room shattered. The hallway outside buzzed with tension, but the person standing there carried a different kind of urgency, an urgency that instantly pushed Keanu and Sandra's emotions into a new territory. Standing in the doorway was one of the senior security managers for the event, a man known for staying calm under pressure, a man who never raised alarms unless the situation demanded it. Yet tonight, his face looked strained, serious, and slightly shaken. He asked if he could come in, and Keanu stepped aside silently to let him enter. When the door closed behind him, the manager wasted no time. He explained that someone outside had taken advantage of the false rumor circulating on social media. A group of troublemakers, not fans but people looking for chaos, had gathered near the back exit. They were shouting lies, pushing against barricades, trying to provoke security, and stirring tension among the crowd. The manager said that if Keanu or Sandra tried to leave the building now, they could be targeted, photographed unfairly, or confronted. He said the situation was escalating quickly, and he wanted them to stay inside until additional security arrived. Sandra felt her chest tighten. She had dealt with chaotic crowds before, but tonight felt different. There was a sharpness in the air, a sense that people outside were not just curious but ready to twist anything into a scandal. Keanu listened quietly, his jaw tightening slightly, his calm expression hiding the storm beneath. He thanked the manager for the warning and asked if the staff outside were safe. The manager nodded, saying security was handling everything for now, but he wanted both actors to stay in private areas until things calmed down. After the manager left the room, the silence between Keanu and Sandra returned, heavy, deep, and full of emotions that had been interrupted again. Sandra walked toward the couch slowly, her hands trembling slightly from the stress. She sat down, placing her hands on her knees, trying to steady her breathing. Keanu remained standing for a moment, staring at the closed door, as if trying to process how the night kept pulling them into chaos every time they tried to face the truth. Finally, he walked toward her and sat down beside her, leaving enough space to respect her comfort, but close enough for their energies to feel connected. He whispered that he was sorry the night had taken such a turn. Sandra shook her head gently and told him it wasn't his fault. She said the world sometimes spun out of control, but she didn't want the noise to silence the truth they were trying to reach. She turned her head slowly, looking at him with a softness that carried exhaustion and vulnerability. She whispered that the moment they had before the knock, when she touched his hand and he shared part of his truth, felt real and important. She didn't want it to disappear into the chaos. Keanu nodded, his eyes reflecting the same sentiment. He reached for the letter again, holding it loosely between his fingers, as if unsure whether to give it to her or hold on to it for a little longer. He took a slow breath and told her the letter wasn't about secrets or guilt. It wasn't about pain he wanted to hide from the world. He said it was a reflection of his gratitude, his regret, his fear, and his truth, all woven into words he never thought he would have the courage to share. Sandra leaned in slightly, her expression open, patient, and warm. She told him she wanted to hear whatever he felt ready to say, with no pressure, no expectation, just honesty. Keanu looked down at the letter for a long moment. Then he placed it gently on the table in front of them, saying that before she read it, before she knew everything, he wanted to explain something else first, something that had never left him all these years. Sandra nodded, waiting. He told her that after they finished filming their first movie together, life led them on different paths. They remained friends, kind to each other, supportive but distant in a way life often creates without warning. He said he always respected her choices and her life, but he carried a quiet wonder inside him. Wonder about what had been between them, what connection they shared beneath the surface, why they felt so natural together even when they barely tried. He said he never allowed himself to explore that feeling because he believed she deserved someone who wasn't weighed down by grief, someone who wasn't broken in silent ways. He said he feared hurting her if he opened up, because his heart wasn't fully healed back then. Sandra listened slowly, her eyes softening with every word. She whispered that she never saw him as broken. She said she saw him as strong, gentle, and real, someone who lived life with humility when many around him lost themselves in fame. Keanu looked away for a moment, his throat tightening. He told her he regretted assuming she needed protection from his truth. He said he regretted believing silence was safer than honesty. And then he said something that shook her. He told her that losing people had shaped him, and he didn't want to lose her in any way, not even as a friend, so he chose silence. He said silence had been his shield, but also his prison. Sandra's eyes filled with emotion, not from sadness alone, but from a deep understanding. She knew what it felt like to protect others at the cost of her own heart. She knew what it felt like to carry feelings quietly because life seemed too complicated to speak them aloud. She whispered that she understood him more than he realized. She said there were moments during their early friendship when she felt something warm and gentle growing between them, but she didn't know what to do with it either. She said she didn't want to confuse friendship with emotion, especially when both of them were injured by life in different ways. Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. He whispered that he wasn't telling her all this to change anything or expect anything. He said he only wanted to share the truth because truth mattered now more than ever. Sandra reached out slowly, placing her hand over his. Her touch was warm, steady, and full of compassion. She told him he didn't need to fear her reaction. She said she valued honesty more than perfection, and that hearing his truth didn't confuse her. It clarified things she had felt years ago but didn't understand. Just as they were beginning to settle into this fragile honesty, another sound interrupted their moment, this time a vibrating phone on the table. Sandra looked at it first, then Keanu. It was Sandra's phone. She picked it up hesitantly, annoyed that yet another interruption threatened their conversation. She expected a message from her agent or a friend checking on the rumor situation. But when she read the name on the screen, her expression changed completely. Her face went pale. Her breathing stopped for a second. Keanu noticed instantly. He asked softly what happened. Sandra swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she whispered that the message was from a journalist she trusted, someone who never contacted her unless something serious was happening. She opened the message with shaky hands, and her eyes widened as she read the lines. The message said, Something huge is breaking online. It involves you and Keanu. Someone released old private photos and invented a story behind them. It's spreading fast. Call me immediately. Sandra felt a shock wave inside her. She tried to breathe, but panic rose quickly. She handed the phone to Keanu, her voice barely steady. He read the message slowly, his heart sinking as he imagined what kind of photos someone might twist into a lie. Sandra whispered that she didn't know what photos they meant. Maybe ones from behind the scenes years ago, maybe from charity events, maybe candid shots taken without them knowing. Keanu exhaled heavily. He whispered that nothing good ever spread this fast unless someone wanted to cause damage. Sandra felt tears burn behind her eyes, not because of the photos, but because she hated seeing their truth stolen and twisted again. She hated that every time they tried to speak honestly, the world interfered with noise, lies, and confusion. Keanu reached out gently, touching her arm. He told her they would face this together, no matter what the photos were. He said the truth inside this room mattered more than anything online. His voice was calm but firm, carrying a strength she needed in that moment. Sandra nodded slowly, breathing shakily. She whispered that she didn't want the world to twist their story. Keanu told her they couldn't control the world, but they could control the truth between them. Before they could decide what to do next, Sandra's phone buzzed again. Another message. She opened it quickly. Then her hand flew to her mouth as she gasped softly. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Keanu, it's not just photos." Keanu leaned closer, his heart pounding. He asked her what it said. She looked up slowly, tears gathering at the edges of her eyes. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Someone claimed that, years ago, you confessed something to me, something private, something I never told anyone." Keanu froze. His breath caught. The room suddenly felt colder. They didn't know what the false claim was yet. But it was clear. Someone knew just enough about their past connection to create a dangerous lie. The moment Sandra whispered those words, the air inside the room changed. It felt heavier, almost colder, as if the truth itself was holding its breath. Keanu watched her closely, noticing the way her fingers trembled slightly around the phone, the way her eyes shifted between fear and disbelief. He moved a little closer, not touching her yet, but grounding her with his presence. He asked quietly what the message said, his voice low, steady, but threaded with a quiet tension. Sandra swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. She whispered that the journalist said someone online was claiming that years ago, during the time they worked together, Keanu had confessed something deeply personal to her, something emotional, something private, something that the public was never meant to hear. Sandra said the rumor suggested she rejected him in a cold way, and the lie painted both of them in a painful, unfair light. The message said the story was spreading fast, twisting their history into something dramatic and untrue. Keanu felt a sharp ache in his chest. He knew he had carried feelings and truths inside him for years, but he also knew he had never said anything to hurt her or put her in a difficult position. The rumor was a violation of something sacred, the quiet respect they had always shown each other. He whispered gently that none of it was real. He told her he never confessed anything dramatic or romantic back then. He said that the regret he carried was about silence, not about forcing feelings on her. Sandra nodded slowly, feeling the relief of hearing him say it, but her heart still raced with anxiety over the growing chaos outside the walls of their quiet room. She sat down on the couch, pressing a hand against her forehead as she tried to steady her breathing. Keanu sat beside her slowly, his presence calm and supportive. She whispered that she hated how the world wanted to turn every real human moment into a story that fit their drama. She said it felt like they weren't allowed to have quiet truths, that someone always tried to twist their silence into something loud and ugly. Keanu looked down at his hands, then at the letter on the table. He told her he felt guilty, not because he did something wrong, but because the truth he wanted to share tonight was getting buried under lies. He said he never wanted her to feel pressure or pain because of him. She turned her head sharply, looking at him with eyes full of intensity. She whispered that none of this was his fault. She said the world didn't need a reason to invent stories, it only needed an opportunity. Silent for a moment, Sandra took a deep breath and whispered that she remembered something from years ago, something small, something quiet, but something the rumor could be twisting. She said she once asked him during filming if he was okay because he seemed distant sometimes, and he gave her a warm smile and said she helped him feel lighter. She wondered if someone overheard that moment or misremembered it through the years. Keanu nodded slowly. That moment was real. He remembered it too. He remembered how her kindness reached him during a time when he was still healing from losses he rarely spoke about. He told her that moment mattered to him, not because of romance, but because he felt seen for the first time in a long while. He told her her kindness had been a light when he needed it most. Sandra's eyes softened. She whispered that she wished people understood that compassion didn't always mean romance. Sometimes it meant understanding someone's silent pain and respecting their quiet strength. She said their friendship had always been built on gentleness, not drama. Just as the conversation grew deeper, Sandra's phone buzzed again. She flinched slightly, overwhelmed by the constant interruptions. Keanu reached for the phone gently and asked if he should check it for her. She nodded, feeling too emotionally drained to read another message herself. Keanu looked at the screen. It was another text from the journalist. The message said the false story was climbing into the top trending topic online. Millions of people were sharing it without knowing the truth. There were videos, edited photos, and exaggerated claims. Some people believed Sandra hurt him emotionally. Others believed Keanu had said something years ago that broke her heart. All lies, all twisted. Keanu felt anger rise in his chest. Not loud anger, but quiet, steady anger that came from seeing someone he cared about being hurt unfairly. He told Sandra what the message said. She closed her eyes, breathing slowly as she tried to calm her racing thoughts. She whispered that she hated being misunderstood, especially when it involved him. He placed the phone gently on the table and turned to face her. He whispered that they could ignore the rumor, but she shook her head. She said ignoring it wouldn't stop the spreading. She said silence would only make the world create more lies. She said they needed to decide what to do, and they needed to do it together. Keanu nodded. He said the truth mattered more than anything online. He said they didn't need a dramatic response or a long explanation. They needed honesty, clarity, and unity. Sandra looked at him with a mixture of vulnerability and strength. She whispered that she trusted him, that she always had, and that whatever they chose to do, they would face it together. There was silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was a moment of understanding, a moment where the truth between them felt stronger than the lies outside. Keanu leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice as he told Sandra something he had been keeping inside for years, something he had only hinted at earlier. He said he never confessed anything dramatic to her years ago, but he did feel something genuine, a soft, warm connection that he didn't explore because life wasn't kind to him back then. He said he admired her, respected her, learned from her, and remembered her kindness long after they went separate ways. He said she became a quiet part of his healing journey, even without knowing it. Sandra's eyes softened, and she felt a warmth inside her chest, something deep, something familiar, something she had pushed aside years ago because life was complicated. She whispered that she felt a connection too, something gentle and rare. She said she didn't understand it fully back then because they were both young in their own ways, trying to navigate the chaos of Hollywood and their private struggles. She said she always felt a sense of safety around him, something calm and grounding. Keanu nodded slowly, holding her gaze, and then something shifted inside the room, something soft, fragile, and honest. For the first time tonight, they were not interrupted. No messages, no knocks, no noise, just truth. Sandra took a slow breath and whispered that she wanted to read the letter now. Keanu froze for a moment, his heart tightening in his chest. He asked if she was sure. She nodded, her voice steady but soft. She said she needed to understand everything he had been carrying, not because she wanted closure, but because she wanted truth. Keanu reached for the letter carefully, as if it were made of something delicate and irreplaceable. He handed it to her slowly, their fingers brushing for a brief second that sent a quiet warmth flowing through the space between them. Sandra held the letter in both hands, feeling the weight of years folded inside the paper. She hesitated before opening it, looking at Keanu one more time. He whispered that whatever she read, he wanted her to know the letter came from a place of honesty, respect, and gratitude. Not pressure, not expectation, not fear. She nodded gently and unfolded the letter with trembling hands. The room fell completely silent. The city lights outside glowed softly through the window. The hallway outside was quiet. The world online was loud, but here in this room time seemed to pause. Sandra began reading slowly, her eyes scanning each line, absorbing every word. Keanu watched her expression quietly, waiting, hoping, fearing, and silently praying she understood the truth between the lines. Her eyes softened, then widened, then softened again. She read about the way he admired her strength. She read about how her kindness helped him through silent grief. She read about how he regretted not telling her sooner that she mattered to him. She read about how he lived with fear, fear of losing people, fear of burdening others, fear of being misunderstood. She read about how she was a light during a dark time in his life, even without knowing it. And then she reached the final lines. Her breath caught. Her eyes filled with emotion. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the paper tighter. The last lines of the letter whispered a truth deeper than everything else he wrote. I cared for you in a quiet way I never understood completely. It was not romantic or dramatic. It was something gentle, something real, something that made me want to be better. I never said it because I was afraid of losing whatever connection we had. But silence has weighed on me for years. I want you to know the truth now, not for the world, but for us. When Sandra finished reading, tears slowly filled her eyes, not out of pain, but out of understanding. She held the letter against her chest for a moment, breathing deeply. Keanu watched her with a vulnerability he rarely let the world see. Finally, she looked up at him. Her eyes were shining with emotion. She whispered his name softly, so softly it barely reached his ears. There was something new in her voice, something raw, something open. She started to speak. But before she could finish, there was a sudden loud noise from the hallway, shouting, running footsteps, urgency. Keanu and Sandra both turned their heads sharply, their hearts pounding. Someone was yelling their names. Then the door burst open, and the expression on the security manager's face was one they had never seen before. Something serious had happened. Something big. Something that would change everything. The door slammed open so suddenly that the quiet, fragile space inside the room cracked apart like glass. Keanu and Sandra both rose to their feet at the same time, their bodies tense, their hearts pounding. The security manager stood in the doorway, breathing heavily, his face pale and urgent. He apologized for the interruption, but there was no softness in his tone this time. Something had shifted outside, something serious enough that he couldn't wait another second. He said the online rumor had escalated into something far worse. Several large media outlets had picked up the false story and were pushing it as breaking news. Fans outside the building were confused, angry, hurt, or overwhelmed. The crowd had grown and tensions were rising. Paparazzi were shouting aggressively, asking questions built on lies. And someone no one knew who had leaked more photos, some edited, some misinterpreted. The situation was spiraling. But that wasn't the worst part. The manager said someone in the crowd claimed Sandra said something cruel to Keanu years ago, words she never spoke. And another rumor said Keanu confessed something romantic decades ago, something he never said. People outside were repeating these lies as if they were truth. It had become a storm of confusion, anger, and noise. Sandra felt her stomach twist sharply. Keanu felt the familiar weight of the world pressing onto his shoulders. Both stood silent for a moment, absorbing the chaos unfolding outside. The manager said they needed to leave the building through a secure path before the situation became unsafe. He said they couldn't go through the main exits. He asked them to follow him immediately. But Sandra took a slow step back, her breath trembling. She whispered that she was tired of running from lies. She whispered that if they didn't speak the truth now, the world would build even bigger walls between them. Keanu looked at her, his heart tightening with a mixture of admiration and worry. He knew she was right. He knew silence would only feed the chaos, but he also didn't want her to get hurt emotionally or physically by the crowd outside. He whispered that they could tell the truth later, somewhere calmer, but Sandra shook her head. She said timing mattered. She said the truth needed to be spoken now, not tomorrow, not next week, not after the world shaped their story into something unrecognizable. She said the world had taken enough from them. She wasn't going to let it take this too. Keanu felt her words settle into him like a quiet fire. He took a slow breath, then nodded. He agreed. The manager said the press was outside with cameras ready. If they stepped out, everything they said would be recorded instantly and streamed across the world. Sandra said that was exactly why they needed to do it. The manager hesitated but finally agreed. He led them down a back staircase, guiding them toward a side exit that opened into a smaller courtyard where the press had gathered. As they walked, Keanu and Sandra remained close, their steps in sync, their hearts beating with a strange mixture of fear and determination. Keanu whispered that whatever happened, he was glad she read the letter before this storm reached its peak. Sandra looked at him, her eyes full of warmth even in her fear. She whispered that the letter was one of the most honest, gentle things she had ever read in her life. She said she needed to respond to it, but after they cleared the noise. When they reached the door leading to the courtyard, the security manager paused. He told them the moment they stepped outside, the cameras would start firing and reporters would shout. He told them to stay calm, to speak slowly, to stick together. Keanu and Sandra exchanged a long, quiet look. She whispered, "We do this together." He nodded softly, "Always." When the door opened, the sound hit them like a wave, shouting, flashes of cameras, voices layered over each other. Reporters called their names with urgency and impatience. The world wanted answers, even if those answers had nothing to do with truth. Keanu and Sandra stepped forward, standing side by side under the bright lights. A reporter yelled the first question, asking if the rumor about a private confession years ago was true. Another demanded to know if Sandra rejected Keanu harshly. Another shouted something hurtful and deeply unfair. Sandra didn't flinch. She stepped toward the microphones, her voice steady despite the shaking inside her. She said the rumors were false. She said no confession was ever made, no cruel rejection ever happened, no argument ever took place. She said the world had taken a few moments from their past and turned them into a fabricated story. She spoke about kindness, about respect, about the importance of understanding before judging. She said she admired Keanu, that she always had, not because of romance, but because of the human being he was, gentle, grounded, and sincere. The crowd quieted slightly, surprised by her calm strength. Keanu stepped forward next. His voice was soft but strong, the kind of voice people instinctively leaned in to hear. He said he never confessed anything dramatic years ago, but he did carry silence. Silence about gratitude, not about unspoken declarations. He said Sandra had been a light during a difficult time in his life, and he regretted never telling her how much her kindness mattered to him. He said he wanted the world to know the truth was simple, quiet, and human, not dramatic or scandalous. The courtyard grew even quieter. Cameras still flashed, but the shouting had softened. Keanu then said something that made the world pause. He said he wrote her a letter, one she had just read tonight. He said the letter was about honesty, healing, and respect. He said it was not romantic pressure, not drama, not confession. It was truth from a human heart that carried years of silence. Reporters asked what was in the letter, but Keanu gently shook his head. He said the letter was private, and he trusted Sandra with it. The world didn't need every detail. What mattered was that lies were being replaced by truth. Sandra touched his arm softly, grounding him, calming him. She looked at the reporters and said that life was not a movie. Emotions were complex. Timing was delicate. Kindness mattered. She said she and Keanu had always respected each other's journeys, even in silence. One reporter finally asked the question everyone online had been shouting. "What does this mean for your relationship now?" The crowd leaned in. Sandra inhaled deeply. Her heart raced. She glanced at Keanu, not for permission, but for connection. He looked back at her with quiet understanding, the same warmth he carried years ago, the same gentleness she had always felt around him. She turned back to the reporters and spoke slowly, her voice steady but full of emotion. "It means we are finally speaking the truth, together." Keanu nodded beside her, adding softly, "And we aren't letting the world decide our story anymore." The press had no immediate comeback. Silence spread through the courtyard, broken only by the soft clicking of cameras capturing the moment two people finally reclaimed their truth. Security eventually guided them back inside. Once the door closed behind them, Sandra leaned against the wall and exhaled deeply, her heart pounding from the emotional storm. Keanu stood beside her, breathing slowly, processing everything. Then Sandra turned to him, her eyes warm, soft, and full of meaning. She whispered, "I never got to tell you what the letter meant to me." Keanu looked at her, his heart tightening in anticipation. She stepped closer, gently taking his hand. She whispered that the letter touched her deeply, that it opened a part of her heart she had kept quiet for years. She said she felt the same quiet connection back then, the same gentle warmth, but life was noisy, and fear made both of them silent. She said she never rejected him because there was never anything to reject. There was only unspoken understanding. Keanu felt emotion rise inside him, slowly, quietly, beautifully. She whispered, "I'm sorry we both stayed silent for so long." He whispered back, "I'm not sorry for tonight." They stood there in the quiet hallway, their hands still touching, their hearts steady in a way they hadn't felt in years. The world outside was loud, but inside everything felt calm, honest, real. Sandra stepped even closer and said something that reached deep into him. "I want us to live in truth now, not silence." Keanu nodded softly, his voice barely above a whisper as he replied, "Me too." The chaos outside continued. The rumors faded slowly. The truth spread faster than the lies now because the world had seen their honesty with their own eyes. But none of that mattered as much as the moment between them. The connection they once left in silence had finally found its voice. And for the first time in years, both of them felt free.